At my granddaughter's graduation, my daughter leaned over and whispered, "Don't clap too hard. You'll draw attention to that wheelchair." My chest burned, but I stayed silent. 3 months later, she tried to sell my house behind my back. I didn't argue. I rewrote my will. When she found out every penny was going elsewhere, she cried harder than I ever did. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. The morning of Sophia's graduation began with trembling hands and a familiar coral lipstick. Evelyn Carter sat before her mirror, staring at the face that had weathered 70 years of storms. The stroke 3 years ago had stolen much from her: strength in her legs, certainty in her movements, ease in her independence, but not her will to be present for this day. She pressed the lipstick carefully across her lips, the same shade she had worn to weddings, birthdays, funerals, and milestones. A color of resilience, a color of family. It took her 2 hours to get ready, longer than she had needed in months, but she didn't care. Today was for Sophia, her brilliant granddaughter, only 18, graduating summa cum laude from Berkeley. Evelyn had helped pay for this education, just as she had once worked herself to the bone to put her daughter through Stanford. It mattered to her that she was there, not tucked away at home like something fragile, but seated in the sunshine where pride was meant to be shared. The wheelchair was heavier than usual as Maria helped guide her to the car. The morning air smelled of wisteria, sweet and almost overwhelming, as if nature itself was determined to wrap her in fragrance for this journey. When they reached campus, Daniel was already waiting, his smile polite but distant, as if the day was meant to be endured rather than celebrated. Lauren, her only child, hovered close, smoothing her navy dress and glancing at her phone again and again, nerves vibrating off her like static. "The ceremony starts in 10 minutes, Lauren said, her voice tight, eyes darting across the courtyard. Evelyn mistook the tension for excitement. They found seats in the section reserved for wheelchairs. Evelyn noticed how other families leaned in close, laughing, snapping photos, voices bright with joy. She reached into her purse for her old digital camera, the one Sophia had taught her to use last Christmas, when the words came, hushed but sharp, right behind her. "She's going to embarrass us in that wheelchair." The hand that held her camera froze. The voice was Lauren's, softened to a whisper meant for one ear only. But Evelyn's hearing had never betrayed her, not in 70 years. The syllables struck like ice water, stealing her breath, pinning her in place. "Mom, please," Daniel's voice followed, low and warning. "She can hear you." "She's practically deaf anyway," Lauren replied, though not softly enough. "Look at how people are staring. Mrs. Henderson from the country club is right over there. What will she think?" The speeches began, the band struck its chords, names were read, but Evelyn heard none of it. All she could hear was her daughter's whisper, circling in her chest, squeezing it tight until she thought she might shatter. She remembered the girl Lauren had been, the 12-year-old who crawled into bed during thunderstorms, whispering that her mother was the bravest person alive, the teenager who had sobbed into her shoulder the night her father died, terrified that she would be left alone, the woman whose dreams Evelyn had carried like burdens on her own back, working nights and double shifts so those dreams could soar. When Sophia's name was called, Evelyn clapped, her hands trembling but determined. Her granddaughter walked across the stage with sunlight in her hair, just as Lauren's had shown before she began dyeing it blonde. Sophia turned, scanning the crowd, eyes landing on their section, and she waved. Her smile glowed with a light so pure that Evelyn's chest ached with it. Afterward, Sophia rushed toward them, cap askew, diploma clutched tight. She dropped to her knees beside Evelyn's wheelchair, eyes shining with triumph. "Grandma, did you see me walk?" "I saw everything, sweetheart," Evelyn managed, her voice steady though her heart quaked. "I am so proud of you." The moment belonged to them, but Lauren swept in, adjusting Sophia's cap, pulling her closer for photographs. Again and again, as Daniel snapped the pictures, Evelyn saw how her daughter angled their bodies, stepping in front of her chair, pushing Sophia slightly away so that her presence was blurred, hidden, or cropped out entirely. Families passed, offering congratulations, but Lauren placed herself between Evelyn and them, a quiet barricade of indifference. The drive home stretched like a wound that would not close. Sophia rode with her boyfriend, leaving Evelyn alone with Lauren and Daniel. Silence pressed down inside the car, the radio murmuring faintly, a poor cover for the chasm between them. Evelyn stared out at passing houses, each one alive with imagined families. Families where grandmothers were cherished, not hidden. At home, Lauren helped transfer her from the car with mechanical precision, her touch careful but devoid of warmth. "We'll see you next week," she said briskly. "Sophia wants to take you to lunch before she starts her internship." The words sounded rehearsed, like a promise made for appearance's sake, not affection. That night, Evelyn sat in her living room, surrounded by a wall of photographs. Lauren's childhood, her wedding, Sophia's school events, smiling faces, milestones preserved. But all of it felt hollow, brittle lies framed in glass. She heard it again, echoing in the quiet. "She's going to embarrass us." Not a medical symptom, not the aftermath of her stroke, but something deeper. The words were drowning her, pulling her under while she sat perfectly still. In the heavy silence of her home, Evelyn Carter understood something she had resisted for too long. To her daughter, she was no longer mother, no longer the foundation of a life built through sacrifice. She was a burden to be managed, a shadow to be hidden. And tomorrow, she vowed, tomorrow she would do something about it. Sleep never came that night. Evelyn lay flat on her bed, eyes tracing the ceiling in the dark, the weight of her daughter's words pressing down like an iron shroud. "She's going to embarrass us." The sentence looped endlessly, poisoning every memory that had once brought her comfort. She thought of the long years after her husband's sudden death, when Lauren was only 12. Evelyn could still see the girl clutching the baseball mitt her father had given her, eyes swollen from crying. "Are you going to leave too?" Lauren had whispered then. Evelyn had sworn, stroking her daughter's hair, that nothing would ever take her away. That vow had shaped every choice that followed. She worked herself raw, doubling shifts as a nurse, spending 18-hour days inside sterile hospital walls while other mothers sat through PTA meetings and clapped at school plays. Her joy had been watching Lauren sleep safely in their modest home, knowing she had earned the roof above them. Vacations were canceled, dinners out erased, new clothes postponed. Every penny was saved, stretched until it frayed. When Stanford's acceptance letter came, Evelyn had signed a second mortgage without hesitation, her hands shaking from exhaustion, but her heart steady with pride. When Lauren wanted to study abroad in Florence, Evelyn picked up extra shifts for half a year, trading her health for her daughter's dreams. All that sacrifice had been meant to build a future where Lauren would never struggle as she had. And it worked. Her daughter graduated debt-free, married Daniel, a successful architect, and settled in a beautiful home in Marin County. On the surface, Evelyn should have felt triumphant. Yet here she was, sitting in a wheelchair, realizing the very life she had built for her daughter had made herself invisible. The stroke had magnified it. Once she needed help with driving, climbing stairs, lifting bags, she ceased being mother and became obligation. Lauren no longer spoke to her with warmth, only efficiency. Every gesture carried the weight of resentment, as though Evelyn's survival was an inconvenience. Her mind spun restless through the night, finally pushing her toward a decision. By dawn, she sat upright, her chest burning with something unfamiliar since the stroke: determination. She needed answers. That morning, Maria tried to dissuade her when she requested to go out alone. "Miss Evelyn, your daughter said you are not to drive. She will be angry if she finds out," Maria said gently, worry in her dark eyes. Evelyn looked at her squarely. "I've been making my own decisions longer than my daughter has been alive. I will continue doing so today. Please help me to the car." Maria hesitated, but something in Evelyn's voice cut through. She obeyed without another word, helping her into the vehicle fitted with hand controls. They felt awkward under Evelyn's fingers, but not impossible. She navigated the streets of Berkeley, every turn a declaration that she was not finished yet. At First National Bank, her longtime advisor, Mr. Peterson, greeted her with surprise. Most meetings in recent years had included Lauren, who insisted it was too stressful for Evelyn to manage her finances. "Mrs. Carter," he said warmly as his assistant positioned her wheelchair near his desk, "this is unexpected. How can I help today?" "I need to know exactly where I stand. Everything, the house, savings, investments, all of it," Evelyn said firmly. He looked puzzled. "Didn't we go over this last month?" Lauren was here to discuss your long-term care costs. Evelyn froze. Lauren was here? About my finances? Yes, she holds your power of attorney, Mr. Peterson explained carefully. She said you wanted her to understand your assets in case you required assisted living. The words dropped like stones into her stomach. Power of attorney. She remembered the papers 2 years ago, fresh from the hospital, her mind still fogged from the stroke. Lauren had framed it as precaution, just in case she ever couldn't make decisions. Evelyn had trusted her. What exactly did she ask? Evelyn's voice trembled. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. She was particularly interested in the value of your home and whether you had considered selling. She said maintaining such a property might be burdensome. The house, her 3-bedroom craftsman, tucked in Berkeley's quiet streets. She and her late husband had bought it 40 years ago. Its walls had heard first words, seen first steps, held Christmas mornings and late-night talks. She had nearly lost it twice paying for Lauren's education, but fought to keep it. That home was her life. And now Lauren was measuring its worth as if it were already hers. Did she mention my will? Evelyn asked sharply. A pause, then a reluctant nod. She asked about updating estate documents. She said you had been talking about changes. Her chest tightened again, but this time with fury, not despair. She had not spoken of her will in years. I want to see everything, Evelyn said, and I want to know exactly what this power of attorney allows her to do. As Mr. Peterson reviewed her records, Evelyn listened with a new clarity. The house was worth over $1 million. Savings and investments, another $400,000. A fortune, yes, but more than that, it was her life's work, her sacrifice made tangible. For the first time, she saw what Lauren saw when she looked at her. Not a mother, not a woman, but numbers, a sum to be inherited. Mr. Peterson studied her face. Mrs. Carter, if you have concerns, we can discuss your options. Evelyn straightened in her chair, spine rigid though her legs could no longer obey. I want to revoke that power of attorney, she said, and I want to change my will. The words left her lips with steady fire. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was reclaiming. She thought I was helpless. She was wrong. Evelyn Carter wheeled herself into Gerald Hoffman's office 3 days after her visit to the bank. She had chosen Gerald not because of prestige or price, but because he had drawn up her original will 20 years earlier and had known her through years of resilience. The mahogany-paneled room smelled faintly of leather and dust, the weight of old law books pressing against the silence. Gerald rose from his desk as his secretary guided her inside. His hair had gone completely silver, his glasses perched low on his nose, but his eyes were still sharp. Evelyn Bosamison, he said warmly, offering his hand. It's been far too long. Your call surprised me. I imagine it did, she answered, settling into place across from him. But this is not a matter of impulse. I've had plenty of time to think. He gestured for her to continue, pen already in hand. I want to make changes to my estate, she said. Gerald leaned back. Changes of this magnitude can echo for decades, especially with family. Are you certain? Evelyn slid a folder across his desk, every page neatly organized. Bank statements, property valuations, a list written in her own careful script. She had prepared this as if it were a shield. I've never been more certain of anything. My daughter will no longer be my primary beneficiary. I want the house, the savings, and the investments, all of it, donated to the Elder Care Foundation. Gerald's pen stopped mid-word. Evelyn, that's more than $1.5 million. Are you absolutely sure? Her gaze didn't waver. Positive, but there is one exception. I want to create a trust for my granddaughter, Sophia. $200,000, enough to secure her future. Graduate school, a first home, freedom. But Lauren must never control it. It must remain hers alone. They worked through the details for over an hour. Gerald wrote, clarified, confirmed, his voice measured but respectful. The trust for Sophia would be airtight. The rest would go to the foundation, a cause that champions seniors cast aside by their families. Gerald finally set his pen down, studying her. This will devastate your daughter. She will see it as punishment. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the armrest of her wheelchair. It's not punishment, it's protection. I will not spend the rest of my life as a woman waiting to be hidden away. If Lauren wants to measure my worth in dollars, then let her see those dollars go where dignity is honored. For a moment, the office fell silent, but for the tick of a grandfather clock. Evelyn signed each page with deliberate strokes, her signature firm despite the tremor in her hand. With each flourish of the pen, she felt something return to her, a sense of control that had been stripped from her with the stroke. When the final document was slid into its folder, she exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath. That night, Evelyn sat alone at her dining table, the new will tucked securely in her purse. The house around her felt different, as though the walls themselves recognized that a line had been drawn. She reheated a casserole Maria had left in the fridge, but for once the solitude did not feel like abandonment. It felt like space. It felt like hers. Her phone rang midway through the meal. Lauren's name lit the screen. Evelyn considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity was stronger. "Hi, Mom," Lauren's voice rang out, too bright, forced. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," Evelyn replied, the word sweetheart catching in her throat but never crossing her lips. "That's good. Listen, Daniel and I were talking, and we think it might be time to start looking at some assisted living facilities for you. Not immediately, of course, but we want to be prepared. There are some lovely places in Marin County, close to us. Activities, professional care, people to talk to." Evelyn closed her eyes, the meaning striking her like a physical blow. This wasn't about companionship or her well-being. It was about convenience, about image. Tuck her away, erase the embarrassment, free Lauren of the shadow in a wheelchair. "Have you spoken with Mr. Peterson about selling my house?" she asked quietly. Silence. Then a hesitant, "Mom, we're just planning ahead. The market is good right now, and that house is so big for you alone. What if you fall? What if you have another stroke? Maria can't be there all the time." Evelyn listened to the logic, each sentence wrapped in reason, but hollow of love. Everything made sense except for the truth. None of it was about her. "I'll think about it," she said finally, though her mind was already sealed. "Wonderful," Lauren replied quickly. "I'll set up some tours for next week." When the call ended, Evelyn wheeled herself to the front window. The oak tree stood tall in her yard, the same one Lauren had climbed as a child. She saw the sidewalk where her daughter had wobbled on a first bicycle, the porch where prom photos had been taken. Every memory that had built their lives still lived within those walls. But Lauren was ready to sell it all without a second thought. Evelyn lifted her phone again and called Gerald's office. The voicemail picked up. Her voice was calm but edged with a steel. "Gerald, it's Evelyn Carter. Add one more provision. If Lauren ever tries to have me declared incompetent or moves me into a care facility against my wishes, Sophia's trust will shrink to 50,000, and the rest will go to the foundation. She must learn that choices carry consequences." When she hung up, Evelyn realized she felt lighter. For the first time since the stroke, she was not waiting for her daughter's permission to live. She was no longer a victim. She was a woman reclaiming her name, her life, her dignity. What would you do if the child you sacrificed everything for tried to erase you? Stay with me, because this story is only just beginning. The will lay on the kitchen table, its pages carefully arranged beside Evelyn's coffee cup and reading glasses, as though she had been reviewing it over breakfast. She had placed it there intentionally. Tuesday mornings were when Lauren arrived to take her to doctor's appointments, punctual as ever, her shoes clicking across the hardwood floor before Evelyn even heard the door shut. "Mom, you really need to organize these medications better," Lauren said, shaking the pill bottles like maracas. "This is exactly the sort of thing that would be easier in assisted living." Evelyn stayed silent, sipping her coffee, waiting. It took 4 minutes. Then she heard the pause, the sudden shift in Lauren's tone. "What's this?" Evelyn looked up with calm eyes. "Some paperwork I've been reviewing." Lauren picked up the will. Her eyes darted across the lines, first quick, then slower. Her face draining of color as the words took hold. Confusion hardened into disbelief, then cracked into something raw, pain, betrayal. "Mom," she whispered, almost hoarse. "What is this?" "It's my new will, sweetheart." Evelyn's voice remained steady, almost gentle. Lauren's hands trembled as she flipped through the pages. The language was clear, unmistakable. Lauren Carter was to inherit nothing. The estate, house, savings, investments would go to the Elder Care Foundation, with the exception of a trust fund for Sophia. The clarity left no room for doubt. You left everything to charity? Lauren's voice cracked on the last word, as though it were obscene. I left everything to an organization that helps people like me, Evelyn answered. People like you? Lauren's breath quickened. Mom, what are you talking about? Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. People whose families see them as burdens. People who are considered embarrassing to be around. The recognition hit Lauren like a slap. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Mom, I didn't mean... You meant every word, Evelyn cut in. At Sophia's graduation, when you thought I couldn't hear you. Tears broke free, mascara streaking her daughter's cheeks. I was just stressed. You know how I get when there are crowds, when important people are around. I didn't mean it. This isn't about one comment, Lauren, Evelyn replied firmly. It's about who you've become. The secret meetings with Mr. Peterson, talking about selling my house, putting me on waiting lists for facilities I never agreed to see. Lauren's shoulders shook. I was trying to help you. I was planning for your future. No, Evelyn said quietly. You were managing me like a problem that needed solving. The room filled with silence, heavy as stone. Outside, the sound of children's laughter drifted from the park across the street, jarring in its innocence. Lauren clutched the will, her knuckles white, her breath shallow. Change it back, she demanded suddenly, her voice sharp. Mom, you have to change it back. I don't have to do anything, Evelyn said. You're not thinking clearly, Lauren shot back. The stroke affected your judgment. You're making reckless decisions you'll regret. Evelyn's lips curled into a small, bitter smile. Gerald Hoffman drew this will, Lauren. The same attorney who handled your father's estate and mine. He spent 2 hours with me, asked dozens of questions, had me sign an affidavit confirming my mental state. Good luck convincing anyone that a woman who built $1 million estate while raising a child alone suddenly became incompetent at 70. The tears in Lauren's eyes evaporated, replaced by something colder, sharper. You're punishing me for trying to take care of you. I'm protecting myself from someone who sees caring for me as a burden. Lauren stood so abruptly, her chair scraped harshly against the floor. Her face flushed red, then pale, then red again. Fine, she spat. Throw away 40 years of being my mother. Give away everything Dad worked for, everything you built. Fine. He would be ashamed of the woman you have become. The words cut through the room like a blade. Evelyn's breath caught, her chest rising and falling with fury. How dare you, Koao, she whispered. How dare you invoke him like that? He loved me unconditionally, through sickness and health, better or worse. He never once made me feel like I was an embarrassment or a burden. If he were alive, he'd be the one taking care of me himself, not trying to shop me off to strangers. Lauren grabbed her purse, her movements jagged with anger. Don't call me when you fall and no one is there. Don't call me when you're lonely and realize you've destroyed the only family you have. I won't need to call, Evelyn said softly. I've already destroyed the only family I had. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. Evelyn sat in silence, the will still lying on the table where Lauren had dropped it. The air felt cleaner somehow, as though a storm had passed. For the first time in years, the quiet did not terrify her. Her phone rang less than an hour later. Daniel's name glowed on the screen. Evelyn, his voice was careful, measured. Lauren told me what happened. I think there's been some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, she said. Look, I know she can be intense sometimes. She's just worried about you. We both are. Maybe we could all sit down, talk this through. Evelyn almost laughed, the sound bitter on her tongue. Even Daniel, with his trained mind for structures and blueprints, couldn't see the truth. The foundation of their family had been cracking for years. David, she said, her voice steady, I appreciate your concern, but some things can't be fixed. They can only be rebuilt from scratch. Please, she's your daughter, he pressed. Sophia's your granddaughter. Don't let pride destroy your family. Pride? Evelyn's voice sharpened. This isn't pride. This is dignity. My family destroyed itself long before this. I'm only admitting what already happened. When she hung up, she sat back in her chair. The will rested on the table, her armor against a daughter who had forgotten how to see her as a person. Alone in her kitchen, Evelyn Carter felt something fierce rise inside her. She was no longer afraid of silence. She was no longer afraid of being alone. She was done being invisible. The war for her dignity had begun. 3 days after the confrontation in her kitchen, Evelyn received word from Dr. Martinez's office that her daughter had scheduled a private consultation. Lauren wanted to discuss her concerns about Evelyn's judgment and decision-making capacity. It didn't surprise her. She had seen it in her daughter's eyes the moment the will was read. The calculation, the cold decision forming beneath the tears. If she couldn't control her mother through affection, she would try to control her through doubt. Dr. Martinez called personally. His tone was gentle but laced with hesitation. "Mrs. Carter, your daughter seems worried. She thinks your recent choices might be impulsive. Would you be willing to come in for an evaluation?" Evelyn agreed without pause. "I'll come," she said, her voice steady, "and I will prove once and for all that my mind is my own." The appointment was long, exhausting in its detail. Memory questions, orientation checks, logic puzzles. "What year is it? Who is the current president? Can you count backward by sevens from 100? Evelyn answered each one, not without irritation but with sharp precision. She saw the quiet satisfaction in Dr. Martinez's eyes as he checked each box. When it was over, he set his pen down. "Mrs. Carter, you are perfectly capable of making your own decisions. Whatever concerns your daughter may have, they do not come from medical necessity." Evelyn thanked him, a wave of relief spreading through her chest. She had braced for humiliation, but what she felt instead was vindication. Lauren's second strike came swiftly. A week later, a woman arrived at Evelyn's door with a clipboard tucked under her arm. She introduced herself as Patricia Chen, a social worker with Adult Protective Services. "Your daughter filed a report," Patricia explained softly. "She's worried you may be vulnerable to financial exploitation." Evelyn welcomed her inside with icy grace. "Please have a seat. Ask whatever you need." The questions were invasive, a test Evelyn hadn't studied for but knew she must pass. "Where do you live? What is your address? How much money is in your bank account? Do you remember what you had for breakfast?" Evelyn answered each one clearly, her voice sharp, her tone clipped with dignity. Patricia nodded slowly, closing her folder. "Mrs. Carter, you have every right to make your own decisions. Concern doesn't override autonomy. I'll be closing this case." After she left, Evelyn called Gerald. "She tried," she said, her voice trembling with both anger and triumph. Gerald's response was calm, steady. "This is more common than you think. Children confuse care with control, but you've documented everything properly. The will is ironclad." That night, Evelyn sat in her living room with the documents spread before her, her armor against the storm. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. The fear of invisibility was gone, replaced by the fierce light of defiance. But war rarely ends with one battle. 3 days later, the doorbell rang. It was Sophia. Her granddaughter stood on the porch, eyes red, tears brimming. Evelyn's heart lurched at the sight. Sophia looked so much like Lauren at that age, but with a softness her mother had long since lost. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice thick. "Can we talk?" Evelyn ushered her inside, guiding her to the couch. Sophia sat down heavily, twisting her hands together. "Mom told me about the will," she said finally. Evelyn's breath caught, but she nodded. "I imagined she would. She's been crying for days. She thinks you hate her." Evelyn's chest tightened. "I don't hate her, sweetheart. But I can't pretend anymore. Things between us are not what they once were." Sophia stared down at her hands for a long moment. She told me what she said at my graduation. About the wheelchair." The words twisted like a knife, but Evelyn kept her composure. "She told you?" "Not exactly. I heard her telling Dad. She was trying to explain why you changed the will. She said maybe she said things that hurt your feelings." Sophia's eyes lifted, glistening. "Grandma, is that really why? Because of something she said?" Evelyn swallowed hard. How could she explain it to an 18-year-old? That it wasn't about one comment, but about years of slow erosion, affection turning to irritation, love replaced with management. "It's complicated," she said softly. Sophia leaned closer, her voice trembling, but clear. Everything is complicated when you're an adult. But some things are still just wrong. Evelyn studied her granddaughter's face, searching for manipulation but finding only sincerity. Sophia was strong-willed like her mother, but her compass pointed true north. "What do you think I should do?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sophia hesitated, then spoke carefully. "I think Mom forgot that you're still a person. Not just her mother, not just my grandmother. You're Evelyn Carter, the woman who worked her whole life to take care of everyone else." The recognition cut through Evelyn's heart, sharper than any insult. Tears pressed at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "And I think," Sophia continued softly, "that Mom is scared. Not about money, not about inheritance. She's scared of losing you, and scared people do stupid things." Evelyn reached for her granddaughter's hand, marveling at its warmth, its steadiness. "What would you do if you were me?" "I don't know," Sophia admitted, "but I do know I love you both, and I don't want to lose either of you because of pride." The words lingered long after Sophia left. Alone again in the quiet house, Evelyn realized this war was not only about wills and money. It was about love twisted by fear, dignity bruised by pride, and the fragile thread still binding mother and daughter together. And she was not ready to let it snap. "Stay with me," because the storm had only just begun. The evening settled heavy around Evelyn's home after Sophia's visit, her granddaughter's words echoing long after the front door had closed. She moved through the quiet house slowly, wheeling herself from room to room, touching photographs as though they might offer answers. Each frame showed Lauren through the years, pigtails and braces, graduation gowns, her wedding day. And Evelyn could not reconcile those images with the daughter who now schemed about assisted living facilities. Sophia's voice rang in her memory. "You're still Evelyn Carter, not just my grandmother, not just her mother, a woman who worked her whole life to take care of everyone else." That single acknowledgement, simple and pure, struck deeper than any insult. It was the kind of truth adults often forgot, but children could still see clearly. The next morning, Evelyn brewed her coffee in her small kitchen and stared out at the oak tree in her yard. She remembered Lauren climbing its branches until her knees were scraped raw, her giggles filling the summer air. Those memories once brought pride, now they brought questions. Where had the girl she raised gone? Had Evelyn's sacrifices somehow smothered her? Or had Lauren's fear twisted into resentment, reshaping love into control? The phone rang mid-morning. Lauren's name lit the screen. Evelyn hesitated, then answered. "Mom," Lauren said, her tone brittle, as if she had rehearsed it a dozen times, "I want you to understand something. This isn't about money. This isn't about wanting your house. This is about making sure you're safe." "Safe?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Yes," Lauren pressed. "You're alone too much. You could fall. You could, God forbid, have another stroke. I need to know you're cared for." Evelyn closed her eyes. "You make it sound like I've already disappeared. Like I'm not even here anymore." "That's not what I mean." Lauren's voice cracked. "I don't know how to do this, Mom. I don't know how to take care of you without feeling like I'm losing myself." It was the most honest thing Lauren had said in years. For the first time, Evelyn heard not cruelty but fear. Fear of watching her mother weaken. Fear of helplessness. Fear that her own life would be swallowed whole by obligation. "I never asked you to lose yourself," Evelyn said softly. "I only asked you not to lose me." Silence stretched between them, so fragile Evelyn could hear her daughter's uneven breathing on the other end. Finally, Lauren whispered, "I'm sorry for what I said at Sophia's graduation, for how it sounded. I was stressed. I was worried about appearances. I said something awful, but you know I don't truly feel that way. Don't you?" Evelyn gripped the armrest of her chair. Part of her wanted to accept the apology, to let it dissolve the months of bitterness. But another part remembered the cold efficiency with which Lauren had shifted her out of photographs. How casually she had spoken about selling the house. How quick she had been to strip her of autonomy. "I don't know if words can undo what's already done," Evelyn said at last. "But I do know this. Things cannot get worse than they already are. What happens next is up to you." "What do you want from me?" Lauren's voice trembled, barrel and small. "I want you to see me," Evelyn replied. "Not as a problem to solve, not as an embarrassment to hide, not as a burden to manage. I am your mother. I am still here. That is what I want you to remember." There was no answer, only silence. Then Lauren said softly, "You matter. You always have." "Then prove it," Evelyn whispered. The call ended with no resolution, but something had shifted. It was not reconciliation, not yet, but it was honesty. For the first time in years, mother and daughter had stripped away their armor and spoken plainly. The distance remained, but at least now they knew the depth of the chasm between them. That night, Evelyn sat by the window, watching streetlights flicker against the dark. She thought about Sophia's wisdom, Lauren's fear, her own aching need for dignity. Family, she realized, was not destroyed in a single moment. It was eroded by silence, by unspoken resentments, by small cruelties left unchallenged. And if there was any chance of rebuilding, it would not come from wills or legal documents. It would come from truth. The house around her was still, but Evelyn felt the faintest stirrings of hope. Perhaps her daughter's apology was only a fracture in the ice, but even the smallest crack could let the light in. The words Evelyn had waited decades to hear came through tears. She sat in her living room, the late afternoon light spilling across the carpet, when Lauren finally arrived. There was no dramatic entrance this time, no clipped heels, no brisk efficiency. She stood in the doorway, uncertain, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. For the first time since the confrontation over the will, she looked less like a woman in control and more like a daughter who had lost her way. "Mom," she whispered, her voice unsteady, "can we talk?" Evelyn gestured toward the chair opposite her. She had promised herself she would listen, but she would not bend. Not this time. Lauren sat down, folding her hands tightly in her lap. "I don't know how to fix this," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't even know if it can be fixed. But I can't keep pretending that everything is fine." Evelyn waited, her silence urging honesty. Tears welled in Lauren's eyes again. "I was terrified after your stroke. I was so afraid of losing you that I started treating you like you were already gone. Like you weren't my mother anymore, but just someone fragile I had to manage. I hate myself for that." Her words pierced deeper than any insult. For years, Evelyn had felt invisible, reduced to her chair, dismissed as though she were nothing more than a burden. To hear her daughter confess it aloud was both agony and relief. "I never asked you to manage me," Evelyn said softly, her voice steady despite the sting in her chest. "I asked you to love me, to see me, to remember that I am still me." "I know," Lauren whispered, her voice breaking. "I forgot that. I let fear twist everything. I wanted to protect you, but all I did was push you away." Evelyn leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "You made me feel like my worth had expired. Like everything I had sacrificed for you meant nothing now that I was no longer useful." Lauren covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. "I didn't mean to. God, I didn't mean to." "But you did," Evelyn said, not unkindly but with the firmness of truth. "You can't erase that with apologies. The trust I once had in you is broken. It doesn't rebuild with words. It rebuilds with proof." The room went quiet except for Lauren's uneven breathing. Evelyn let the silence stretch, filling it with the weight of everything unsaid. The nights of double shifts, the tuition bills, the years of sacrifice that had built Lauren's life. Finally, Lauren lowered her hands, her face blotched with grief. "Tell me what you want from me. Tell me how to prove it." Evelyn's voice softened, though her resolve did not. "I want you to stop treating me like a problem. Stop speaking about me as though I am an embarrassment to be hidden. Stop making decisions about my life without asking me. I want you to remember that I am your mother, that I matter." "You do matter," Lauren whispered. "You always have." "Then let your actions show it," Evelyn replied. "Not for my sake alone. For yours, for Sophia's. She sees what's happening between us. She's wise enough to know love should never feel like shame. Don't let her inherit our brokenness." Lauren nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'll try. I don't know if I'll get it right, but I'll try." Evelyn studied her daughter, seeing not the woman hardened by fear, but the girl who once clung to her during thunderstorms. Somewhere within Lauren, that child still lived. Whether she could reach her again remained uncertain. But for the first time in months, Evelyn allowed herself to believe there was a chance. As the evening deepened, and the shadows lengthened, Evelyn felt a strange peace. They had not solved anything. The wounds still bled, but they had spoken the truth, raw and unpolished, stripped of appearances. That was more than they had managed in years. When Lauren left, the house was silent again, but it was a different silence. Not the silence of abandonment, but of possibility. The fracture had not healed, but light was seeping through the cracks. Would forgiveness come? Or would pride pull them apart once more? Evelyn didn't know, but the battle for her dignity had shifted. She was no longer invisible. She had demanded to be seen. And now the question was whether her daughter was strong enough to keep looking. Stay with me, because the choice she made next would change everything. 8 months passed like the slow healing of a fracture, painful at first, but gradually knitting together with fragile strength. Nothing between Evelyn and Lauren changed overnight. Trust was not rebuilt in a single gesture, but slowly in small ways, her daughter began to shift. The calls about assisted living stopped. The brochures that once piled on Evelyn's kitchen counter disappeared. The subtle angling of photographs, the attempts to push her wheelchair out of sight, those small cruelties faded. Lauren had not become tender overnight, but she had become deliberate. She had stopped treating her mother as something to manage and started learning to listen. The turning point came on Sophia's 19th birthday. The family gathered at a restaurant overlooking the bay, the kind of place where sunlight spilled through tall windows and laughter from other tables rang bright against polished glass. When the hostess tried to seat them in a back corner, away from the bustle, Lauren spoke up. "Excuse me," she said firmly. "My mother would prefer a table by the window." The words stunned Evelyn more than she could admit. It was such a small thing, barely worth notice in anyone else's world. But for Evelyn, it meant everything. For the first time in years, her daughter had advocated for her, not as a burden to hide, but as a person with preferences worth honoring. Throughout dinner, Evelyn studied Lauren carefully, watching her face as Sophia told stories about college classes and internship applications. There was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a humility perhaps, or a recognition she had once lost. Evelyn did not trust it completely, but she allowed herself to hope. The following weeks brought more of these small gestures. Lauren began asking before making decisions. She stopped brushing past her mother's sentences and started letting her finish. She visited not with clipped efficiency, but sometimes with no agenda at all, simply to sit, to drink coffee, to be present. Evelyn herself was changing too. She had begun volunteering with the Elder Care Foundation, the very organization that would inherit her estate. Maria drove her once a week to their offices, where Evelyn answered phones and spoke to seniors whose stories mirrored her own. Abandoned parents, overlooked grandparents, people who had worked their whole lives only to discover, in their twilight, that family could wound as sharply as strangers. The work gave Evelyn perspective. She saw that her pain, though unique in its details, was far from rare, and she realized how fortunate she was that her story was shifting, even slightly, toward reconciliation. One evening, Lauren arrived with a gift. She carried a large photo album, its cover bound in soft leather. Evelyn opened it with cautious hands, expecting the usual progression. Childhood to adulthood, milestones arranged neatly in chronological order. But the pages were different this time. Lauren had chosen not to organize the pictures by years, but by moments of connection. Evelyn reading to her daughter when she was sick. The two of them planting tulips in the garden. Tears in their eyes as Evelyn hugged her after Stanford's graduation. "I wanted to remember who we were to each other," Lauren said quietly, watching her mother's hands turn the pages. "Before everything got so complicated." Evelyn's throat tightened. She turned slowly until she reached the last page. It wasn't a polished family shot or a carefully staged portrait. It was a candid photograph Daniel had captured at Sophia's graduation. Evelyn clapping as her granddaughter crossed the stage, her face radiant with pride. The wheelchair was barely visible in the frame. What shone was not limitation but joy. "I've been carrying shame about your wheelchair for 3 years," Lauren admitted, her voice breaking. "But when I saw this picture, I realized the only person who should be ashamed is me. Not because you need the chair, but because I let it change how I saw you." Evelyn traced the edge of the photograph with her fingertips. In that picture, she saw not weakness, but strength. Not invisibility, but presence. She saw herself whole. The house that night was quiet. but no longer heavy with loneliness. Sophia visited every Sunday now, bringing laundry to fold while she told stories about exams, professors, and the dizzy rush of adulthood. Sometimes Lauren joins them, cooking dinner in the old kitchen. 3 generations of women learning again how to sit at the same table without conditions. Small steps, fragile progress. Not perfection, but something worth holding on to. And Evelyn, sitting in her wheelchair by the window, knew the fight for dignity had not been in vain. The quiet of Evelyn's house no longer felt like abandonment. It had become a sanctuary, a space where peace finally outweighed loneliness. She had lived through storms, widowhood, single motherhood, a stroke that tried to steal her independence, and the slow unraveling of trust with the daughter that she once believed would never turn away. Yet here she was, still standing in her own way, still breathing in her own rhythm, still herself. The will remained unchanged. Gerald called occasionally to confirm, his voice even and professional. "Are you certain you don't want to revisit the documents?" he would ask. Evelyn always gave the same answer. "The will stands, not out of spite, but out of resolve." It was no longer about punishing Lauren. It was about preserving dignity. The money, her life's work, would flow toward those who needed it most. And Sophia, her bright granddaughter, would be shielded from her mother's control, given a future built on respect. That knowledge gave Evelyn more peace than any inheritance could. Sophia's visits became a ritual Evelyn treasured. Sundays were filled with chatter, the scent of laundry soap lingering on folded clothes, stories of classes and deadlines, of hopes and heartbreaks only a young woman on the cusp of adulthood could carry. Sometimes Lauren joined, moving through the kitchen with a quiet attentiveness that had been absent for years. It was tentative, awkward at first, but real. They spoke honestly now of the stroke, of fear, of the suffocating weight of expectation. For the first time, Evelyn felt her daughter was beginning to see her not as an obligation, but as a person. 3 months earlier, the change had been clear. At a crowded restaurant, when a hostess tried to hide Evelyn's chair at a back corner table, Lauren had spoken firmly. "My mother would prefer a table by the window." The words still echoed in Evelyn's chest. That small defense, that recognition, had meant everything. It was proof that cracks in the ice could widen into open water if only they were tended to. One afternoon, Lauren arrived with another gift, a photo album she had made. Page by page, Evelyn turned through memories reframed not as milestones, but as threads of connection. Reading bedtime stories, planting tulips, holding hands at graduations. At the very end was a picture Evelyn had never seen before, a candid of her, clapping for Sophia as she crossed the stage, pride glowing in her expression. The wheelchair was barely visible. The joy was unmistakable. "I've carried shame about your chair for years," Lauren confessed quietly. "But when I saw this picture, I realized the shame wasn't yours. It was mine." Evelyn touched the photograph with trembling fingers, and for the first time, she believed her daughter meant it. Her work with the Elder Care Foundation deepened her understanding. Every week she spoke to seniors who felt erased by their families, people who had once carried children on their backs only to be treated as relics. She shared her story not as a victim, but as proof that dignity could be reclaimed. Some listened with tears in their eyes, some with knowing nods, but all of them left lighter, as though the truth itself had given them air to breathe. One Sunday, Sophia lingered after dinner. She leaned against the kitchen counter, her red hair catching the light just as her mother's had when she was young. "Grandma," she said with shy determination, "will you teach me how to drive with hand controls?" Evelyn blinked in surprise. "Why would you want to learn that?" Sophia shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "Because someday I might need to know. And because I want to understand what your world is like." The words pierced Evelyn's heart with a mixture of pride and awe. Her granddaughter understood what had taken her daughter decades to see. That adaptation was not weakness, and empathy was not pity. That night, after Sophia had gone, Evelyn sat by her window, the oak tree swaying in the evening breeze. She thought about the girl Lauren had once been, about the woman she had become, about the daughter still fighting her way back to tenderness. She thought about Sophia, fierce and wise beyond her years, carrying their family's fragile hope into the future. The wheelchair sat beside her bed, not as a symbol of limitation, but as proof of endurance. It carried her where she chose to go on her terms, in her time. She no longer looked at it with shame, nor with bitterness, but with respect. It had become her companion in survival, her partner in reclaiming life. She had once feared she was nothing more than a burden, an embarrassment, a shadow of a mother. But she knew better now. She was Evelyn Carter. She was not erased. She was not invisible. She was still worthy of respect, of love, of dignity. And in the quiet of her home, surrounded by photographs of a life lived with sacrifice and fierce devotion, Evelyn smiled. The war was over, and she had won, not by defeating her daughter, but by refusing to let go of herself. If this story touched you, share it so others may remember that every parent, every elder, every soul deserves dignity. Like, share, and subscribe to keep these stories alive.